Well, half of the nation was declared to be racist this week as a poll released by Essential Research found that some 49% of persons polled would support a ban on Muslim immigration into Australia. Several people, including many I know personally, reacted with the predictable amount of sanctimony and virtue signalling that tends to follow from such stories. And in particular, Greens Senator Scott Ludlam took this opportunity to write a lengthy emotional diatribe on Facebook.
Reports this morning about the level of public support for Hanson's Muslim immigration ban make for sobering reading. Almost half of the country supports some sort of ban on Muslim immigration.
Admittedly, I have been avoiding news outlets lately as I've been busy, but neither the poll nor the news articles I've seen suggested that those polled supported One Nation Senator Pauline Hanson's ban on Muslim immigration. It may seem like a small point to my listeners, but because he's a politician, it sticks out to me in an extraordinary fashion. Here are two sentences, both ostensibly stating the same thing, that a surprisingly large amount of Australians support banning Muslim immigration, but the first sentence is full of weasel words. Reports, Ludlam is not specific, about the level of public support, an unspecified amount, for Hanson's Muslim immigration ban. Pauline Hanson certainly supports the idea of such a ban, but she certainly doesn't own the idea, and the participants were not polled based on her idea. So why would Ludlam put her name to this ban? Well, whatever the reason, the job's been done. Anyone reading this is now associating this theoretical ban with Pauline Hanson and therefore with racism. And if Ludlam is taken to task about any of this, his intellectual escape routes are already constructed for him, and he can dodge responsibility for what he said. I can almost hear him in my head right now. Well, the poll did not specifically ask about Hanson's ban, but she certainly has some public support for it. See what I mean? These are things I'd like you to keep in mind as we read through his response to this news, because this kind of thing happens quite frequently in his post, and I actually think there's a lot about this story to be revealed by presenting what appear to be the facts as responses to things he says.
Most jolting for me was that the poll reported that around one-third of Greens voters support such a proposal. It's only a small comfort that the largest cohort that opposes the proposal are Greens voters too, but make no mistake, this division is one that will define politics for all of us for the foreseeable future.
It certainly is a division, Mr. Ludlam. You call everyone who disagrees with you on this a racist.
The politics of fear, seeded by John Howard and honed by Tony Abbott and his allies, have brought us here. It's no use questioning the legitimacy of Hanson's support. 1 in 20 Australians voted for the One Nation Party, and they have 4 senators as a result. There are a number of Liberal MPs accommodating those views in Parliament and the wider community.
Accommodating these views, the politics of fear. These are all statements made without concrete examples. I'm no fan of Tony Abbott, and my opinion of John Howard is even lower, but I can't remember anything said by these men on the topic of Islam. However, both of these men are unpopular, and again, it strikes me that the reason these men's names have been mentioned has nothing to do with what they've said or done, but because they provide an easy object of outrage to the reader. The reader now has a person to blame for the cause of this unwelcome information. And again, if Ludlam is taken to task about any of this, he's once again able to duck responsibility for it because he wasn't specific. But if you think he's gone off the rails now, listen to this.
Nearly half of the people you share your life with have the view that people of a particular faith are all too great a risk to their Australian way of life. Racism should have absolutely no place in our discourse, and the failure of many to condemn it when they saw it is at least part how we ended up here. But we must not ignore the people that have tuned in to the voices of the far right.
Now, I did something that Scott Ludlam and apparently everyone else who read his post didn't do, and that was actually read the survey results presented by Essential Research. Participants, when asked if they supported the ban on Muslim immigration, were also asked why, and the most common reason given at 41% was that they, Muslim migrants, do not integrate into Australian society. So I don't really know how Senator Ludlam got the idea that people believe Muslims to be a risk to the Australian way of life. It's not suggested anywhere in the survey, and it's not able to be inferred from the results that are given. So why is he just making shit up? If the results themselves are so condemning, why the need to fabricate more? Mr. Ludlam continues.
Whether it's the precision-targeted dog-whistling of Abbott in recent years, the enfeebled opposition that failed to take on the racially loaded asylum-seeker debate, the never-ending escalation of the war on terror, the devastation left in the wake of failed promises of globalised corporate trade, or the growing gap between the rich and poor in Australia, for too many people, their fears about the future have been given a name and a face by politicians willing to exploit them.
Yeah, I really doubt that people see Muslim immigration as the root of literally all of their problems. I mean, give One Nation voters some credit. They at least have the sense to blame Asians for stealing their jobs. But seriously though, we don't need to speculate the reasons why people would support a ban on Muslim immigration. It's all here on the report that's free to access for anyone who's willing to read it. I will admit it's a quantitative survey, so a lot of detail is lost, but there's nothing here to suggest that the opinion on Muslim immigration is driven by asylum seeker policy, or by growing wealth inequality, or failed promises of globalized corporate trade. I have no idea what this even means. Sheer speculation is masquerading as opinion here. Ludlam provides no evidence for any of this. It's just ad hoc rationalising based on the only piece of information he has absorbed from all this, that 49% of Australians would support a ban on Muslim immigration.
The challenge ahead is substantial and systemic.
Systemic. I love this buzzword. It's so marvellously meaningless. The challenge ahead is part of a system.
There's little point in telling people they're wrong to be concerned. They are concerned already.
I actually don't agree with this. I think it's important to forcefully re-establish a sense of perspective, particularly where terrorism is concerned. I believe that terrorism thrives on appearing ubiquitous and unpredictable, and I think any facts that dispel these illusions are ones people ought to be aware of, no matter what effect it has on their precious little feelings.
Most people just dig in further if confronted with facts that refute their views.
Interesting. I wonder if Senator Ludlam will redact his statements woven from whole cloth after watching this video. I'm not going to hold my breath, though. I don't really have much more to add to Ludlam's statements, so I'll just sum up by saying the following. First of all, I'd like to be clear that I don't think that Ludlam is the only politician to speak in this way. On the contrary, I think most politicians do, but that's no excuse. Having the idea that you are morally right doesn't pardon your actions. The ends don't justify the means. With that said, I think Ludlam's comments recently are obviously topical, and since he's one of many culprits, I see nothing wrong with responding in the way I have if someone learns something about parsing a politician's statements. Second of all, I think most people are tiring of being told that they're racist just because they criticised a religion. I think most people realise that having a particular faith is different to being born with certain superficial genetic traits. Ludlam was half correct when he said that people's politics had shifted more to the far right. I think that's true of not just the right, but also the left. People seem to be much more reticent about sharing their political views with people, and paradoxically, this has made their views more extreme. What struck me the most about this poll on Muslim immigration is that those who answered strongly oppose and strongly support outnumbered those who answered oppose and support respectively. It strikes me as odd that opinion is so forthright about this. Now, I'm not a statistician, but this spread represents an inverse bell curve, and from what I understand, such a bell curve is uncommon in statistics. There are lots of people at the edges of the spectrum and fewer in the middle. And I think the reason why it's surprising to many people that so many support the ban on Muslim immigration is because people have stopped talking about Islam. Why? Because the discourse on Islam has become toxic. Religion and race have been made so thoroughly interchangeable to such a degree that any criticism of the religion is deliberately mischaracterized as racism, allowing the criticisms to be dodged instead of refuted, and the one who made the criticisms shunned or shamed into silence. Who wants to enter into an honest discussion in such a climate? Even erstwhile respectable newspapers like the Sydney Morning Herald are now complicit in this deliberate mischaracterization. Just look at the way the Herald phrased the reasons why people supported the ban. The most common reasons for wanting a ban were fears over terrorism and a belief that Muslim migrants do not integrate into society nor share Australian values. This is outrageously misleading. As we now know, the most common reason, by a rather large margin, given for supporting the ban was that Muslim migrants do not integrate into Australian society. So why was that placed after fears over terrorism in the Herald? By placing it second, fears over terrorism was given priority syntactically and gave the reader a false impression that one answer was more common than another, when truthfully it was the opposite. This deliberate sweeping of an inconvenient fact under the rug was compounded by lumping it together with the third most common reason: Muslim migrants do not share Australian values. Although similar, these are distinct reasons, and yet they have been joined together by the dishonest verbiage of this newspaper article. Some of you may say that all three of those reasons were equally bad, and therefore rearranging them is not dishonest. But if that's the case, why change the order? Surely if all three answers were equally bad, then no editing would be necessary. No. To me, it seems that there's a deliberate effort being made to portray Australians as fearful and racist and intolerant, and frankly, I find this disgusting. While I don't agree with her views on Muslim immigration, it doesn't surprise me that Pauline Hanson has risen in popularity again. Those who feel they have genuine concerns about Islam have very few people who will take their concerns seriously. Greens Party members like Scott Ludlam certainly don't. They're too busy chiding these people for being racist. The media certainly don't have these people's ears. They seem now to just be a 24-hour propaganda machine, oblivious to how many people are becoming disillusioned with them. Infighting is still a pretty real threat to the two main parties to risk taking a strong stance on a controversial position, in my opinion. So who does this leave? Pauline fucking Hanson. Surprise, surprise, dickheads. People aren't becoming more racist. You've become more bigoted, more intolerant of those whose views differ from yours, and you've pissed them off while you did it. All Hanson had to do was say thank you very much and get 1/20th of Australia's fucking votes, and now we're here, and nobody but me seems to realise why. I would not support a ban on Muslim immigration. It contradicts what I think is a fundamental human right, namely freedom of expression and religion. I think refugees of whatever religion and nationality choose to come to Australia because, lame as it sounds, Australia is a free country. Like almost all developed nations, Australia, generally speaking, respects the rights of an individual human being, which gives us an advantage over nations that don't. By restricting religious freedom, we risk that advantage, and by so doing, the nation becoming just like the places these people fled. If you're concerned about how extreme people's views are becoming, why not take the time to listen to their views without calling them names like racist? As I said before, people seem to be talking politics less frequently and paradoxically seem to be becoming more extreme in their views. By upsetting this cycle, you prevent people from potentially becoming far right-wing Pauline Hanson supporters. If that's not a good reason to do something unpleasant, then I don't know what is. But please, don't take my word for any of this. Think for yourself. And thanks for listening.